This is Leader Time by FedNet, a podcast for Senate observers, with floor remarks from Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer. Thune followed President pro tempore Chuck Grassley in marking the 40th anniversary of C-SPAN broadcasting Senate floor proceedings before remarks on traveling his state during the Memorial Day break. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, as we begin our proceedings this morning, I want to take a moment to recognize a milestone here in the Senate. On this day, 40 years ago, C-SPAN broadcast the United States Senate for the very first time. On June 2nd, 1986, the American people were able to turn on their televisions and see the Senate come to order and their senators engage in debate until the gavel dropped later that day. Gavel-to-gavel coverage, Mr. President. That's the C-SPAN way. And over the last 40 years, C-SPAN hasn't missed a beat. It's captured 43,830 hours of Senate proceedings, broadcast 169,000 speeches by hundreds of United States senators who've served in these halls, and captured the moments, large and small, historic and human, that make up the United States Senate. Mr. President, on that day, that first day, 40 years ago, the Senate was considering an education bill. And what a fitting topic of discussion for C-SPAN's first day covering this chamber. Education is C-SPAN's entire mission. C-SPAN urges its viewers to, quote, make up your own mind. And for 40 years, C-SPAN has enabled the American people to make up their own minds about what we do here in the Senate. It's helped countless American students see the legislative process in action. And it's ensured that what happens here is lost neither to the day's news cycle nor to history. And I trust that C-SPAN will continue to offer the American people a front row seat to the Senate for many decades to come. Mr. President, C-SPAN captures a lot of our work here in Washington, but just as important is the work that senators do back in our states. Last week, the cameras were off here in the chamber, and senators were back at home hearing from the people that we all represent. I spent last week back home in South Dakota traveling around my state and hearing directly from South Dakotans. I had a chance to catch up with mayors of Webster and Lennox. Mayor Danny Fergan of Lennox took me around his city. He showed me new housing developments in Lennox. I saw the city's infrastructure needs. And we went down Main Street to a few businesses, including El Mariachi Restaurant. Mr. President, I also spent some time up in northeastern South Dakota. As I mentioned, I met with the mayor of Webster, Mike Grosick. And I dropped by a few local businesses that are benefiting from the permanent tax relief Republicans delivered in the working families tax cuts. I went to the 322 Kitchen and Cocktails in Aberdeen and saw the Main Street expansion and the owners have undertaken, including the first rooftop lounge in the city. I visited quite possibly the coolest store ever, the Hitchin Post, a family-owned business that has been an icon in Aberdeen for over 50 years and was recently named one of America's best Western retailers. And then over at the Meat House in Andover, I had a conversation about the local agricultural economy and the ranchers who run that business, with the ranchers, I should say, who run that business and who take pride in their home-raised beef. Mr. President, I've always valued the opportunity I've had lately to spend some time hearing from South Dakota's young people. This past month, I've been in classrooms in Winter, in Rapid City, and Sioux Falls. And we've had a number of school groups visiting Washington, D.C. as well. I attended the Dakota Relays at the beginning of May and then the state track meet this past Friday. And last week, I had the privilege of speaking at Boys State at Northern State University and then at Girls State at the University of South Dakota in Vermilion. Mr. President, it's always a pleasure to get to talk with young people and to hear what's on their minds and what their dreams are for their futures. And I suppose, Mr. President, that's because on any given day here in the Senate, that's what our focus as Republicans boils down to. Cultivating a brighter future for young people and for all Americans. A future that's secure, with greater prosperity, and more opportunities to get ahead. That's our focus here in the Senate, Mr. President, and it's what we continue to work toward every day.
For his part, Schumer criticized President Trump's nominating Bill Pulte to succeed Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence and a potentially rescinded settlement fund.
Well, first on the appointment of Bill Pulte, or the announcement of an attempted appointment to Bill Pulte. Trump's appointment of Bill Pulte to serve as acting director of national intelligence is another Trump low. A guy who can file such baseless, political, and outrageous charges against political office holders he doesn't like can't be entrusted to protect our national security. Pulte's already proven himself willing to act as a Trump puppet. And now Donald Trump wants to put him in charge of the nation's intelligence, a place where integrity is demanded. A man who doesn't have an ounce of integrity is being put in that position that demands total integrity by Donald Trump. The Director of National Intelligence is supposed to speak truth to power. But Donald Trump appears to have chosen Pulte because he speaks power's truth instead. Americans need an intelligence chief loyal to the facts, the intelligence, the security of the nation, not the political interests of one man. At a time of growing threats around the world, this nomination raises a fundamental question. Is the president looking for independent intelligence or political validation? His fiascos in foreign policy, most recently in Iran, show he doesn't listen to facts or intelligence. And he's going to get even more trouble with Bill Pulte in this very sensitive job. The intelligence community exists to protect the American people, not to serve as another instrument of presidential retribution. And now on the slush fund. The only way to ensure Trump's $2 billion taxpayer-funded giveaway to Trump's MAGA allies never sees the light of day is to abolish it by law. The only way to make sure that Trump's slush fund never sees the light of day is to abolish it by law, not to corrupt the word. Not to trust the word of a corrupt president who stands to benefit the most from it. The same goes for the license Trump gave himself and his family to commit tax fraud with impunity. Any promise from Trump is worthless. And when it comes to ending his blatantly corrupt slush fund or his blank check to commit tax fraud, Trump barely promised anything in the first place. That is why the first amendment I will offer on the Republican reconciliation bill will be to ban Trump's slush fund permanently and to revoke his family's free rein to commit tax fraud forever. Trump doesn't get to make off with at least $100 billion his family owns on taxes, and he doesn't get to use your tax dollars to pay off the MAGA right. Not on our watch. The only way to ensure his $2 billion tax-funded giveaway never sees the light of day is to abolish it by law, not to trust the word of the corrupt president who stands to benefit the most from it. We need to set the record straight about what exactly the Trump administration did and did not commit to yesterday. Trump's Department of Justice put out a statement saying that it would abide by the recent court order that temporarily blocked Trump from using Americans' tax dollars to pay off his MAGA loyalists, his billionaire friends, and violent insurrectionists who maimed our Capitol Police on January 6. Let's be clear. The Trump administration hasn't made any commitment to kill the slush fund permanently, nor has it pledged to revoke the broad immunity from tax audits that Trump granted himself and his family. Can you believe it, America? Trump and his family still get to cheat their way out of paying their taxes and then use your tax dollars to line their pockets and give handouts to his billionaire cronies, criminals, and cop-killing insurrectionists? Trump's slush fund is corruption at its absolute worst. America has seen a lot of corruption from this administration, but this corruption, I don't think we've seen anything like it in our entire history. Trump shook hands with himself, suing his own government and then settling the case so he could steal your tax dollars, America. all at a time when families are struggling to make ends meet amid skyrocketing costs meet. What do Republicans have to say? What do they have to say about this? What are our Republican colleagues saying about this god-awful slush fund? Well, after the DOJ's meek statement yesterday, one of my colleagues across the aisle said Trump's slush fund is a moot point. A moot point? Trump's far-right radical reward program is anything but moot. Trump and the GOP didn't suddenly find their conscience. They simply hit a temporary roadblock. If Senate Republicans are truly concerned about Trump's corruption, then prove it. Ban the slush fund by law permanently. If Republicans revisit their reconciliation bill this week, as I said, the very first amendment I will offer will be to ban Trump's slush fund permanently and revoke his family's free rein to commit tax fraud. The corruption is so grievous that toothless Republican guardrails won't cut it. Democrats won't settle for half measures. We're going to kill this slush fund permanently, and we are going to bury it, and bury it deep. On Rubio coming to the Hill, Secretary Rubio has a lot to answer for when he testifies before the Senate today on China, on giving kickbacks to Russia, on Ukraine, on withholding arms to Taiwan, on this administration's ridiculous rhetoric on NATO, on the disastrous gutting of foreign aid that's leaving Americans vulnerable to one infectious disease after another, on Iran, on foreign corruption. The list goes on and on and on. And today, with all these questions, all these bungles, all these terrible, terrible missteps that hurt America, today will be the first time Marco Rubio, the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, testifies before the American people since the start of Trump's disastrous war with Iran. First time. The war's been going on over 60 days. He's finally coming to the Hill to talk about it. Yesterday, Trump says he finds the peace negotiations with Iran, quote, very boring, and that, quote, he couldn't care less if they're over. I'll tell you who cares, Donald. I want to tell you, Donald Trump, who cares. Our troops who are in harm's way, their families, Americans across the country who are sick of paying the immense costs of this disastrous war, including paying $4.50 a gallon at the pump. Secretary Rubio needs to answer whether he cares about ending this war. I urge my colleagues as well to ask Rubio to address recent reports that the Trump administration left a loophole open for the past year and a half that allowed China to acquire potentially hundreds of thousands of cutting-edge American AI chips. These chips are essential to America's national security and to our economic competitiveness, but Chinese companies linked to the Chinese military have funneled them through foreign firms with seeming impunity. By failing to protect this vital technology, the Trump administration has threatened our lead in the AI race and weakened our national security. Either the Trump administration failed to identify the loophole, suggesting gross incompetence, or kept it open willfully, which is very, very dangerous.
Thanks for listening. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without express written permission from FedNet is prohibited.